Edward de Bono said, "Creativity involves breaking out of established patterns in order to look at things in a different way. Concrete, wood, lead and bark are all materials used by textile artist Ann Goddard. Since she learned how to embroider, the assumptions of what a textile practice can be has changed radically. Distressing fabrics by burning, waxing, rubbing, tearing, scratching, piercing and fraying, Anne pushes the boundaries of what we might consider the classic properties of textiles are." Referring to her work as constructions rather than sculptures, this term describes exactly what Anne does. She builds up forms and surfaces by putting parts together. Excited by the juxtaposition of materials while studying her Masters in Fine Art, Anne began looking at making an idea into visible things by developing her own visual language and manipulating a diverse range of materials. Anne has always felt connected to nature as inspiration for her work and often looks at the impact humans have had on the environment, from creating pupa-shaped forms to folded spiky multiple constructions to fragments that hint at the discarded or disappeared. Anne is part of the 62 group, and her work sits between fine art and craft, exhibiting all over the world with numerous shows across the UK and Europe. 2022 saw the release of her book, Mixed Media Textile Art in 3 Dimensions. While textile tradition may have been the starting point, Anne is no longer concerned with categorization, but is motivated by the visual excitement of mixing diverse materials and the challenge of finding new ways to join them. So let's hear more about the artist as explorer, how ideas can be interpreted through different materials, and how experimenting with unusual resources can lead to unconventional solutions, as we welcome UK-based textile artist Ann Goddard, this week's Friday feature artist.
Hello, Anne.
Hi there, Tara. Lovely to meet you, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this Friday feature.
Our pleasure. And welcome to everyone. We've got lots of people joining us this morning, this evening. That's great. So please let us know where you're from and feel free to, I'm sure you'll have lots of questions, people out there, as we bring up. Hi, Eva. Hi, Monica, Marion. Yes, welcome everybody. It's going to be great. I always feel like a bit of a kid in the lolly shop. Like I realize that I do this every week. I start with waving my hands around because so I just hearing all that stuff again. I'm like, yes, juxtaposition of materials. Yes, all of those interesting things. So I will take a breath and calm down. And it's always interesting looking at an artist's work and then looking into how they got to where they are and the work that they're doing. So you were telling me the other day that you worked as a primary school teacher for 10 years before doing a master's in fine art around 2003. So how did winning the Charles Henry Foyle Trust Award lead you to doing a master's, and how did that study change how you approach textiles?
Well, I initially started textiles doing a City and Guilds course, which changed my life. And it was through that I applied for the, I submitted work to the Charles Henry Foyle Trust, and I won, which was fantastic. And it was an actually monetary award, which allowed me to pay to do a master's. And that completely changed my way of thinking, because previously I'd loved mixing the different materials, but more just enjoying the juxtaposition. I got excited when I mixed them together and thought, oh yeah, that looks, I really like the effect of that, the aesthetic. But then when I did the masters, it made me think more about how to use materials as signifying elements, where you could choose your materials for their associations to whatever the idea was you were exploring. And that's what I've been doing since. So by that I mean Like when I've done my bark cloth things, I choose bark cloth because it refers to trees. I mean, other people may not get that reference, because I know a lot of people don't know what bark cloth is, but it's actually made from the inside of trees. So I use that to try and suggest the idea of trees. And I use it taught me to use processes as well as signifying elements. So if I burn something, it's usually because I'm referring to, I want to give a connotation of destruction, vulnerability, or, you know, to nature, that sort of thing. So it did change my approach, although I think my aesthetic more or less stays the same.
And so going back to that time at the Masters, and I guess you said you'd come from the guild and the embroidery background. And then, I mean, I don't know, you would arrive on the first day. When they said materials, did you already know that you were kind of going to go towards the aesthetic that you have now? Or did you kind of start with a more traditional?
Is this for the MA?
Yeah.
No, I actually, I didn't know what to expect. I did think it was just going to be a case of, learning more about, I don't know, just extending myself really. But I did think I'd come out with a full body of work that I could then actually exhibit. But I didn't, because the MA happened to be very theoretical and with practice as part of it. But it did knock my creativity a bit. Their idea was to knock you down and then build you up again.
Right. Okay.
And, so no, my approach to materials completely changed.
Yeah. And you'd mentioned the bark cloth, and I've got a image of your work on the brink. So that was also the first time that I saw your work back in 2019 when I happened to be in London and was at the Knitting and Stitches show, which you've just like been there today in Harrogate. So that's amazing. As I said, I'm amazed that you're still talking. But anyway, I digress. Back onto this. So this I'm going to show is On the Brink, which actually won you an award in 2019 and uses bark cloth. Can you tell us more about what the piece represents and how it's constructed?
Yes, a lot of my work, most of my work is environmental, and I'm really concerned with climate change and really mass extinction and things like that. And this piece was based on a reading in an article that I did that was suggesting how 40% of insects could possibly be extinct within about 10 years. And most of those insects would be pollinators, which are bees and butterflies. So, these images here, the black pupa, I decided to concentrate on butterflies and made these pupa shapes. And I wanted to represent how not all of them would survive. So the black ones were actually aimed at suggesting their demise. And when I made those, the bark cloth ones, the normal sort of orangey coloured ones, were the ones that were surviving. And the black ones represent those that would be lost. And when I made this piece, I don't normally dye materials, but I found it difficult to actually colour the bark cloth satisfactorily, because I've been burning the other orange bits, the just natural bark cloth. And because that was to sort of indicate that would they survive, are they being destroyed? And the benefit of doing that, actually, I was pleased, because when I did manipulate the bark cloth into the pupa shapes, it actually highlighted the edges. So that was a double whammy, really. I was pleased with the way it portrayed it. But the black ones, because I burnt the edges on, it softened the edges, and you get lovely, I'm sure a lot of people watching, I've probably burnt things, and it does change the edges of things. So I thought, right, well, I could try burning the bark cloth, but I couldn't do it all black, all burnt, because it would just crumble altogether. So I dyed them, and not being used to dyeing, it was a bit of a disaster, I thought, because they all shriveled up in the dye. So it took a lot of manipulation to get them, pull them into the shape. But actually, I thought that was better to the narrative, because I didn't get the more uniform pupa shape. Some of them were like shrunk really small, and others were sort of funny shapes. But it sort of fed into the narrative, I think.
And was it very flammable, the bark cloth? Because I was trying to burn something today, and I think I was saying to you the other day, it catches on fire very quickly.
Well, when I am burning, I did those on a candle, with a candle, and I always have a wet cloth in my hand, and I damp them down if it looks like it's, you know, catching hold more than just smouldering. So
yes,
I am very, you know, safety aware. But, yeah, they were also hung on sticks. I've been to a butterfly farm and had seen where they'd sort of hung all the pupa, the chrysalises, on sticks, and the sticks on that were actually balanced. It was displayed balanced on entomology pins, which are insect collector pins, because I wanted to stress, you know, accent the vulnerability, really, that they were on the brink. You know, I mean, they could literally just fall off the wall or whatever. But,
and where is it now, that piece? Well, shouldn't I ask
in a
that?
box at a friend's house, because she's supposed to be sending it back to me. But yeah, so I've still got that piece.
Gorgeous. And so when I was kind of reading up on some of the things, like, it seems that your work is kind of a mix of art, maybe craft, or textiles. Like, do those words mean specific things to you, or, like, I suppose in the intro, it's beyond category, or how do you react?
Art, I discovered that the fine art was really all about ideas, rather than, well, there was material investigation, but it was all geared up towards the idea, rather than just randomly, intuitively, which I had been doing before, just sort of mixing them. Yeah, I don't like to be categorized. It's very difficult to categorize what I do, I think, because I realize I am on the margin of textile practice. And although I always include, well, mostly include textile elements,
but
I do like to do things with other materials in as well. Yeah, and also part of the story, really, to try and, you know, create the narrative.
Yeah, it's more like fibre artist, perhaps, rather than just textile, because maybe textile implies stitch and fibre.
I know.
Order. But and so congratulations on the book. I was just so intrigued when I saw that released not so long ago. And there you are, proud, proud mother of the book.
My book, yes.
And so you were saying you got lots of interest in sales today at the knitting.
Yes.
Yeah. And were people surprised, or were they just so excited that they can actually find out more about what you do?
Yeah, I've had a lot of nice comments about it. People saying it's been, you know, inspirational to them. So I just hope it goes okay, you know.
And you were saying that it wasn't necessarily something that was on your bucket list of things to create.
I never considered writing a book at all. As my husband would say, I have trouble at all. Thank you, Eva. Just saw the message there. Yeah, I mean, my husband said at first, you know, write a book. You have difficulty writing emails. Anyway. But then when I talked to him and my children about it, they said, oh, it's a wonderful opportunity, Mum, go for it. Yeah. So I did. And I'm so glad I did, because it's made me understand more about what I actually do and why I do it.
Wow. I mean, that definitely comes across. It's it has categories which are fantastic. It's really well organized, and it's generous too. Like, it has the images, and then it breaks down how you create them, why you created, and having that insight into someone else's process really does, make you think, well, okay, how, if I was going to do something, how would I approach it? So I think it's very successful, I think.
And no, I wanted to, because that's the publishers sort of organised them as case studies, which I'd already sort of separated them into tables with how, my thought process from the theme I explore, where I get my ideas from, how I research, why I choose the materials. I went through the whole list for certain pieces to try, because it's difficult to actually tell people how you've chosen the materials for their connotations, basically, or their associations. So I hope that would simplify things for people.
Yeah, definitely.
Maybe suggest an alternative way for them to work if they weren't already doing that sort of thing.
Yeah, it definitely plants the seeds of how one might begin approaching something. Yeah. So a couple of the subjects that come up quite a lot, the two themes that are mentioned in the book that you're exploring are boundaries and also human impact on the environment. So I've got a couple of images from that. So this one, penned in. Can you just give us a little bit of background on that?
That's, I initially started boundaries because I could tell I was on the boundary of textile practice, and I became very aware of the hierarchies in art, in the art world, and that textiles is quite a long way down. It's regarded, because a lot of women do it, it's not so highly regarded as men, work that men do. So really that, boundaries were sort of restrictive for textile people actually trying to exhibit wouldn't a fine art exhibition, basically, like somewhere like the Tate, unless you had come from a fine art background, like Tracy Emin, for instance. She does textile things, but she's got the fine art background. So that penned in was basically trying to show, because it's made of felted silk paper, and that's all trapped, layers of it are trapped between either burnt wood, slate, sticks, what else was it? I think yes, and I put them on rods with wing nuts to sort of fasten them tight, to show that it was trying to sort of suggest that textiles is, because even in colleges over here, I don't know what it's like in Australia, but like embroidery isn't really studied so much as a skill in universities anymore. It's all under the guise of textiles, and they don't really teach skills, I believe. So, it's
I mean, I love how you've got those contrasts too, and like the trapped thing, that message really comes across. And again, like the juxtaposition thing, like the soft, the fragile, the hard, all of that.
Yes.
And I just wanted to bring up like a couple of inspirational, amazing, and first on the shopping list.
Pascal. Thank you, Pascal. That's fantastic. Yeah.
See,
thank you.
Great. And here you are chatting to us.
Lovely comments. Thank you so much, everybody.
So special. And so that leads me to the next one, which these two in particular do really, they're more obvious, not obvious, but you can the novice can see what it is you're trying to say. I mean, or it backs up.
That was another boundaries piece. Yes, beyond boundaries. That was made from reclaimed planks, and it's also got lots of paper yarn, distressed fabrics. And they were all held down again with metal fixings, which are more often associated with things that men do.
Yeah.
But the reclaimed planks, actually, because I do try to use reclaimed things if I can. They had been part of my MA, where I ended up making a huge installation that out of wood knotted together with neoprene cord. That was the textile element, but
Yes,
it controlled access to the gallery, and it was an enormous thing.
Whoa.
And so that's what I made for that. So I didn't come out with a body of work from the MA. I had this huge thing which I just had to dismantle and couldn't sort of assemble again.
Wow.
So I recycled all those planks that I used. They had been the floor of a church hall actually previously. And I've recycled them again in other works. So, which also implied access or restriction of access. So I tried to carry the theme through from into, the materials.
And one thing that does come through, I mean, lots of things come through in the book, but the importance of research, and that you do seem to embark on or enjoy a lot of the research. So how do you let the information process once you've done the research? Do you sleep on it, go for a walk, or do the ideas come as you're finding out more?
Well, they do, because I make lists of words, sort of things that suggest maybe materials or processes I could use. In fact, I've got a board here.
Yes,
which I normally have in my studio. It's got lots of my lists of words. These were all ones to do with all my environmental, discovering what biodiversity is.
Love a word list.
So those, I keep those in my studio. I was going to say, can you see me? That seemed to be.
Yes, I can see.
Yeah, so I use those and phrases as well that I highlight and sort of think about. I use a lot of the words for titles to inspire me when I make the work. One of them I use is vestiges, which I used for a piece made out of old bark.
Yeah.
Because they were literally pieces of bark that had been left over from a wonderful, well, I was told it was like a 500-year-old yew tree that had been cut down, or it had to be removed because of a housing development. So these were literally vestiges, bits that were left over.
Yeah.
So I made bark pieces from that, trying to recreate habitats and things like that out of the bark.
So sometimes the materials actually can feed back in and lead to the idea.
Yes.
And we were talking about sketchbooks or notebooks, and so what kind of form does your sketchbook take?
Yeah, well, sometimes if I'm doing 3-dimensional things, I collect things in little books, in little pockets, plastic pockets. These samples were when I was experimenting with mixing iron with felted fibres. They were all different ratios of iron to fibres. So I kept all my samples and they've all got numbered, and I've got a journal that says what all the different ratios were. I generally use my sketchbooks for jotting down ideas. Seeing this one. So I often just have loads of writing, which isn't very exciting for anybody to look at, but it reminds me of what I'm doing. And
it's not all just the visuals.
I put my lists of words in there as well. And this also shows, this was for a piece, a collaboration piece that I do mention in the book, actually. It was collaborating with another artist called Jane Maurice, who does painted textiles, and they're very textured. And what I do, that was tricky because I was responding to her work, which is 2-dimensional, and I wanted to make a 3-dimensional piece from her work. So what I often do is I took lots of photographs of her work, close-ups, and made notes on them, and then I convert the photos on photo software on my computer to black and white, so I can concentrate on the structure rather than colours, because as you've noticed, most of my work is colourless. It's like monochrome. And then I photocopy them, and that sort of gives a different idea of, just visually.
Yes, that is interesting.
So I do, if I am working from something visual rather than just words, I do go through a photographic process rather than sketching. And then I like to zoom in because I love close-ups, and it highlights the little tiny details, which I do like, little details and things.
Yes, and being so tactile, it would kind of almost be impossible to sketch that out. It kind of...
I mean, you could, but personally, I enjoy photography so much. I just, I prefer to work through photography. So,
you were telling me also that you photograph your own work. That was another. You used some prize money from an award to purchase some camera.
Yes, that was the Fine Art Textile Award, which is the pupa piece.
Right.
Yeah, I won. I was very fortunate. I won £5,000 from that. I'm not sure what that amount is in Australian dollars.
Still a decent amount.
So it's a good amount.
Yeah.
So I was able to. I mean, I've always had a good camera, but I decided I wanted a sort of professional quality one.
Yes.
And so I bought myself a Canon. Can't remember the model, but it's an excellent one. And so the only thing is, it's so complicated. I haven't quite mastered it.
And that must be nice too, like to get up close and personal and satisfying to then have beautiful images of your work.
Well, I use it. It's too heavy to carry about with me, so I use it for taking pictures of my artwork.
Yeah.
And I think when you take pictures of you, because I like taking photos, I find it easier to just take loads and loads of them.
Definitely.
You've got to take loads before you get really what you would regard as the best shot.
Yes.
Which saves me some money on having to pay for
more money for material
photography.
And yes, that was referring to the rivets. Brilliant. And obviously, yes,
we do need more trees, Vicky. Yes,
yes. Luckily, we have people such as yourself to bring this to our attention. So, going to two things this is now going to talk about. In the book, you talk about felted papers, and I was interested in that. And so this is a close-up of a fibre that you often use. Can you tell us what the little spiky thing is?
Yes, they're made of, it's from a piece that's a bit literal, really. Under Concrete was the title. And I was exploring basically the phrase that you often hear, how the concreting over the landscape. And I'm concerned about not just trees, but a whole habitat that is lost. And very often the little tiny creatures, there might be insects, or there might be just little seeds and things like that you can interpret them how you want, really, that get lost during that process of just urban sprawl and literally concreting over the landscape. So I wanted to try and show vulnerability by contrasting the little felted, they're not really properly felted. I was taught it was called felted silk paper making, but so I've got one here. So I'm sure people listening, a lot of people probably know how to do this anyway, but I have so many loose fibres. These happen to be, these ones were cotton fibres, I think.
Wow.
And bristles.
Amazing.
You can get bristles just cut from brushes basically, and they're quite stiff. I like those because it means they will stand on, balance on their little spikes. That's more like a teasel. If you know of a plant called a teasel plant.
Oh, like a grass kind of.
Yeah, so what I do is I'll just quickly run through it because for anybody who doesn't know, you spread the fibres between net.
Oh, yes, okay.
And those have actually got the little spikes included with the fibres.
Oh.
And I know there's supposed to be a special medium that lots of people use, but I just use diluted PVA. And depending on the strength of that dilution, it affects the stiffness of the felted paper that you're making. I hang those up to dry, and when they're dry, you can then just separate them from the net, and you end up with the
creatures.
It's a bit tricky to do. Anyway, that's the idea of it. You peel them off. And you're left with all the little pieces. And because I build up all my work from little pieces, those were just all stacked together. And so I've made quite a lot of pieces from this sort of thing. And I just loved the juxtaposition of the very delicate fibres with the concrete to show the vulnerability, really, of the natural things. And I have got some different ones here that these were just, I was trying, that was silk tops, I think. It's not like soft, wet felting. That one's flax fibres. That was silk noils. That I like that because it's so delicate. You can really make it very thin, but it's quite you can manipulate it quite well. And this bit was made from recycled bottle fibres, which I don't know whether anybody's used those, but they have a lovely little sort of zigzaggy kink in them.
I love the zigzag.
I was just experimenting with different fibres basically with those.
Wow, thank you so much. That's just extra bonus. Wasn't expecting to see little makings of the spiky fluffy things. Thank you. Yes, that's just, everyone's just very grateful.
Thank you, Jan.
Yes, everyone just went, oh my goodness, it's going to be so kind.
People are saying such lovely things. Thank you, Deb. Thank you. That's what I was hoping, that they would show they were vulnerable.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I mean, I don't know whether you kind of just happened on it or whether it was just out of the process, but I guess eventually that sort of play and putting materials and just experimenting with different things suddenly then sometimes just, like it all slots together of an idea that you had.
I mean, those, in my research, I found this wonderful book, which I do mention in my book, of microscopic images taken by photographers for Kew Gardens at the seed bank. And I was just blown away by the images of individual seeds. I mean, they coloured them to sort of highlight them more, but just the structure of them. And they had lots of little, bits coming out. And so that was basically what inspired me to try and make spiky shapes,
And speaking of spiky shapes, so we've got your extinction piece.
Oh,
love that.
I do like spiky things.
Yeah.
Those are made of waxed fabric. And again, they're built up from lots of little tiny pieces. They were all made up of the same number of little tiny units. And they had I started hand stitching them, but it was taking so long. And I tried machine stitching them, and that was difficult to feed the thickness through. But eventually I did manage to do it. And I enclosed wires. The wire is a special wire that stays straight. It doesn't, a lot of wire, as soon as you touch it, it just bends. That wire is very straight. And I just thought that gave the impression more of I suppose their demise again, you know, where like rigidity, I know it sounds a bit gross, but sort of, what am I thinking of? You know, when somebody dies, rigor mortis, you know,
Oh,
that
yeah.
sounds a bit awful.
No,
I
because
just thought, you know, the stiffness and the wizened look of them.
yes, because I was
And
trying
because
to.
they were all made from the same number of pieces, but all manipulated differently, I was trying to imply a mass extinction, really.
Right. Yeah, I love that because I suppose that I was trying to get my head around that. Like, I was just drawn to the aesthetic, and it is so interesting. You just want to know more. And then I guess the black thing, you just assume that it's a life form that is now no longer existing.
Yes, yeah.
But then because it's not recognizable as a particular creature, but then it doesn't really have to be. So, yeah, that
No,
just
so
makes
I mean,
sense.
people can interpret it. I've probably grossed people out saying that, but
No, I think that explains that. Yeah, that explains a lot.
yes, yeah,
Yeah, that's amazing. And yeah, extraterrestrial creatures.
yes,
And
yeah.
yeah, thank you.
Thank
This is
you,
so
thank you,
inspiring.
Mary.
Oh, and so yes, I want to go and play too. And I
Oh,
think
yeah, it's lovely comments people are giving. That's fantastic.
playing is so important. And so another piece then that this one is maybe, well, it's no rigor mortis. It's
No.
perhaps a bit more a fibre arts-y. Yeah, could you tell us more about this one?
Yes, this is called Hanging by a Thread. I did a series of these. Again, it was most of the pieces on that are, oh yeah, that one shows it better. That's corrugated card, and the other ones were paper. I burnt all the edges. It was basically, again, to do with just, you know, felling trees, and it was for an exhibition called Package Tour, because it was for the 62 group, and we were touring the work round. And I just thought I could get an environmental theme from that by thinking of the packaging and in the title. So I made things from the packaging. You know, I
Oh,
don't know if you get lots of Amazon deliveries or something, you end up with so much cardboard and
yeah.
just so much, when you think of all the paper that we use and how many trees have been cut down to provide all that. So I tore all the little pieces and burnt them to sort of again indicate that, you know, destruction, and sort of made them into, I suppose you could think of them as big pods or big seeds or something that might, you know, and I did them hanging from a thread to imply again that they were vulnerable.
But it's the way that you do it as well.
Yeah.
Like, again, your aesthetic, it's beautiful. Like, you
Thank
could
you.
just see that as a
I mean, they were put on willow, which I
right.
shaped, and I fastened them together with neoprene cord, which is material that I love.
Yes, I need neoprene cord in my life.
Yeah. It's such a sensual material. Actually, I meant to bring my big roll of it in, and I've forgotten. So
No,
but you
that's
get it in
amazing.
different thicknesses. I've got some that is about that thick, and
Yeah.
those ones were about that thick. But I've also got some very thin. But it's so sensual to touch. It's just lovely, and if you cut it short, it sort of sticks up, and if you leave it longer, it droops. Which is, when I used it in my bark pieces, I wanted to imply that possibly there was new growth coming.
Is it
And it
this?
was and it was a man-made product, and that's got copper wire coming through it. So although that was made from all the little pieces of bark left from the yew tree that I was mentioning earlier, that had been cut down, you know, destroyed, and I stitched them all together with this neoprene cord and sort of held them together as well with the copper wire, because copper and the neoprene cord were man-made. So I wanted to try and imply, I mean, people probably don't get this, but in my own mind, I was trying to imply that what man has destroyed, we can also try and conserve and mend, if you like, you know. So,
and it kind of looks a bit nesty as well.
It is, yeah. I was trying to create, I think it's called Habitat, one of my Habitat ones. And so I was trying to create another habitat that could, you know, hopefully provide a home for all these poor little creatures or seeds or something, you know. Well, not for home, you know, for creatures, yeah.
And then following on the extinction habitat endangered theme, I have the endangered one.
Yes.
Or burning.
These were, it's a bit of a theme with me because I just love burning all sorts. These were actually miniature pieces. I did 3 for a miniature exhibition in Bulgaria. And I was very fortunate there as well that I won the grand award with it. And the little the paper pieces that have been burned. And again, I've got little bristles.
Yeah.
And I've manipulated each little. So again, you can see how I use repetition to build up shapes and, you know, forms. So I just made loads and loads of these little tiny forms and threaded them onto a wire, and literally the shape of the pieces it creates the shape of the form, just the way, you know, they all go on together. So they sort of almost make themselves, you know, once you've got all the little pieces.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, I love that. And definitely the repetition, like you say, whether it's in one piece itself or putting several pieces together. Like you've got your assemblage pieces.
Assemblages, yes, that was a response to one of Jay Maurice's pieces as well. I discovered that she builds her surfaces up from loads of scraps from her like fabric stash, and it was really difficult to find a way in to make pieces for that. And I suddenly thought, well, I'll just make it from scraps from my studio that I've got, because I use so many different materials. So that incorporates burnt wood, concrete, painted papers. I painted wood, and they're all held together with wrapping, the textile technique of wrapping. And literally, I normally don't like to put more than 3 sort of things together to make a form, but I did those with all similar colors, so I think they sort of blend together as a group, you know, that sort of fit together with their color, you know, they're linked by
a cohesive
color. And
I'm assuming that you didn't have a jackhammer to create all your little bits of concrete.
No.
And so in the book it says that you poured concrete and you experimented with that as a material. That's
I've got a sample here. Well, a couple of samples. Whoops, which is the one? I practice a lot of samples. This one was trying to create stitch patterns or marks in the surface of the concrete. These are arisen ones. I discovered that if you use like a foam board, if you press things into it, it leaves little cavities. And then you pour the concrete onto that and let it dry. When you take the foam board peels off easily and you're left with little raised things. So that was just one of my experiments of trying to include textile elements, although it's not textile, if you see.
And again, that opposite of something usually soft in something hard. And sort of.
And this was, I was just trying to do the little sort of spiky things again. I was trying to embed them in the concrete, and that was rebar, which is reinforcing bar, found on construction sites. And I wrapped them in scrim and tried to embed them. and this is the rebar with wire round sort of. But no, I wasn't very successful with the piece that was eventually made from this sample, with including the fabric in. It wasn't till I did the little spiky things that I found a way of that worked really. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure everyone here is making lots of notes and very inspired, and going to get rid of
Ofra. No, thank you.
Getting rid of all their soft things and trying to figure out what they can use next. So yeah, then I was looking at because this has been fantastic. Then you've got like willow, and I guess for the basket makers out there, in Australia we're all lusting after willow because we can't get it, and in the UK we already got it soaking and ready to use. And I read that this is kind of loosely woven together.
It is, because this was done for an exhibition to do with, there's a place in the UK called Grimsby, which used to have a really vibrant fishing community, and it's just declined. And so the exhibition was really to do with the decline of the fishing industry. And I looked at lobster pots and nets and things like that. And so I decided to use willow because the old lobster pots used to be made from withies, which is another name for willow. And so I just wove it together, but I wanted to give the impression that it was disintegrating in a way. I'm sure basket makers who see it closely think, wow, this looks absolutely rubbish weaving or whatever. But it was deliberately done loosely so it would sort of fall into that shape. And is
that the only thing holding it together?
It's just wire, yes.
Wow.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh.
Yes, I'm just quite a big piece actually. It's
Yes, I'm jealous because I cut up something recently that was woven together like that, and then when I held it up, all the little spokes all fell through the wire. So I keep looking at paper.
No, I did something called sumac weaving with it, where you wind round the sticks, but kept it sort of fairly loose. Yeah.
Note to self. So I was going to ask you, do you ever, but you kind of answered this before, do you ever sort of dismantle something or rework? And was this one that you did have to do?
That was in a way like it was formed like the little spiky ones, but that was a big piece. I can't describe how big it was, but it was a big piece.
Right.
And it was wall hung. And that was supposed to be going to Hungary, Bulgaria as well. But it got damaged, and I thought, oh no. Luckily, I got a photo of it before it disintegrated. But it's made of paper because it was for a paper exhibition, and all the units. I just did it like I made the little miniature one. All the separate pieces, the layers are all separate units. Some were textured with wax. I printed a lot as well with words from my research, with things to do with deforestation again. All the words I'd collected, I printed them on just ordinary paper basically, because I mixed papers. The printed paper, your generic printer paper.
Yes, I can see that. Yeah, now.
With Himalayan papers, which are sustainable. So I wanted to sort of combine them both, really. And I sort of knocked back the words with gesso and stuff. And tea dye as well. So you can't see the words totally clearly, but you can get a glimpse of them if you look closely. Yeah, and it was again a case of threading them, and they just sort of made this shape because they were all slightly different sizes. So they again fell into that shape. So disappointed. But then I did reuse the papers. In fact, the piece I've got here behind me, it's made of willow, and the papers. I don't know whether you can see. You probably can't see from that distance, but I joined them together with the papers from that other piece.
Oh.
And that's called mutation because it is mutated from my other piece. It's a different shape from that. So
do you enjoy coming up with the titles, or do you always have the title before the piece is finished?
Sometimes from my research I get the titles, and other times I have to think about I guess I try to think of the title if I haven't got it at the beginning as I go along, because it does help me with the form or the process as well. Make sure I'm sort of trying to tie it all in together.
Yeah.
So the idea and the process and the materials all sort of fit together.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Yeah.
This has been so amazing, and I knew that the time would go so quick. And he says she just wants to go and play in the recycle box. So yes, and I think I saw.
Oh, thank you.
That one as well. So amazing. I wanted to ask you, what is your favorite tool? I mean, you probably have lots, but do you have one?
Well, my favorite tool I happen to have here.
Dun, dun, dun.
Is a Dremel drill. Other makes are available, and I also got the workstation that goes with it.
Right.
I mean, the drill itself is great. You can use it as a little hand tool, and it comes with all sorts. Well, you can buy lots of little attachments for it where you can sand things down. And when I use metal, I find it useful they've got little grinding things so you can smooth it down. But what I particularly like about the workstation, is you can put, like if I'm using bark, I would put it there, and then it's got a handle, and you just lower it down, and you get accurate, you can make accurate holes in the right place.
Yes.
So I just love this tool, and I use it for lots of things, and you can turn it that angle as well, so that if I do want to sort of grind down some like rebar ends or something, I would take that. They've got you can get very tiny drill pieces.
Where have I been?
I would put one of the little sanding things on here that way round, so you can just hold your metal against it or whatever.
Yes.
So it's really useful.
The other day I said Dremel. We know what was your favorite tool, and you said Dremel, and I was like, great. And then you said workstation, and I was like, yeah, great. And I do have a picture of your workbench here with your lovely word lists. And I was like, oh yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, the rest of the studio is a complete tip at the moment.
Yes, but I didn't know you meant actual Dremel station, clippy thing with thing. That's fantastic, because when I tried to drill holes the other day, I kind of thought, well, this is all very good, but what if I slip? But then you just demonstrate.
Yeah, I mean, it frees your hand so you can hold it in place and just pull it down. And I've got a bigger version of that, which I've used for drilling into wood, but I've also drilled into I think I put it in the book, the thick neoprene cord, because that sort of clamps it in place, and it's a big Bosch one.
Wow.
I've just collected all sorts of power tools, but I don't use them all the time. I mean, it just depends on the actual piece I'm making.
Yeah, I reckon you're a woman.
I'm doing little pieces at the moment, so I just need the hands basically, and pliers and things like that.
Yes, look, I'm just going to take a breath and settle myself here, but I'm just going to show this piece because it's so amazing. So could you just tell us what is the grey bit?
Oh, the grey bit's actually black. It's the way the photo. It's burnt wood. I discovered after I found out how to do it that the Japanese have been doing it for years, and it's called shusukiban, where you burn the wood, and it gives a wonder. I don't know whether you can see the texture of it, but there's it just leaves a wonderful. The surface of the wood crackles under your blowtorch as you're doing it. And that was, I wanted to imply destruction and burning again, because this piece, it's called Microcosm. It's only a smallish, we had a brief. In fact, it's in the knitting and stitching show at the moment. we had a brief where you had to be a piece. It was restricted size to, you weren't allowed to go bigger than 30 by 30 by 30 centimetres. So, yeah, and the orange bits in the middle are bark cloth, which are burnt. And they're held on to a prepared piece of bark cloth. This is prepared where I've burnt the edges. And I like to use the stitches because when they make it, the makers very often just stitch holes together. And I like to think of that as implying conservation, basically. So I try to, when I use bark cloth, I try to include the little stitches in with it. So all those bark cloth pieces on there are attached to something like that, which is then attached to the wood. And it was to do with, again, basically for climate change, because the way wildfires like you've had in Australia, you know, so much destruction of, you know, your trees and your wildlife. And it's happening all over the world with climate change, and also just the deforestation in the Amazon. So basically I wanted to imply that I called it microcosm because it's just a little snapshot of what's happening all over the world. And yeah, the bark cloth's all burnt, so and it's sort of curled up, a bit like scorched earth type idea.
Yeah.
So,
And again, despite its sort of meaning and what it represents, that aesthetic is just consistent.
Yeah, I've just sold that piece as well, so I'm really pleased.
Yes, well done. So the absence of colour, I mean, do you ever work with green, considering that you're, you know, it's always the link to the environment, or it's pretty much this is your palette?
It is. I don't like adding colour to things. I like the colour to come from either the materials themselves, as in like lead or the bark cloth, or from processes such as the burning, or like when I've done lead things, if you're hammering it on the floor, it picks up a different texture and colour from just doing that. Yeah, so I like it to just come from those, really.
Yeah. And the other thing
I do love colour in other people's work, but I just can't. I find it difficult to sort of work it into my work. So,
and when you've got towards the end of a piece, you know, how do you know when it's right? Like, is it a genuine feeling, or is it more of an eye and aesthetic thing? Or?
People often ask you that, and it's difficult to explain when you just know. I know. I always say to myself, if I'm asking myself questions, does it need more? It's obviously not right yet.
Right.
Yeah, I just seem to sort of think, oh, right, okay, yeah, I'm really pleased with that. Yeah, we'll go with that. But otherwise, no, I've found all the way through that I do find if I'm sort of having to say to somebody else, what do you think of this? I know it's not right. Yeah, so.
Well, that's interesting. So you have been amazing. I mean, that's such an overused word, but informative, like generous, all of those things. And I can't believe like that's been a sort of an hour. And congratulations on the book. It really is. I mean, it is inspiring. And
well, I just hope it can be of use to some people. I mean, I know a lot of textile people think, well, you know, what's this all to do with? But for anybody who's interested in maybe trying out a different approach, you know, just as a little play or something. You know.
And you also mentioned some other artists as well. That
yes, I invited some other artists who work with mixed media into the book, and they give a different voice. You know, they provided statements as to how they work and the materials they work with and why they do it. So that's all different from me. And it just, I think it helps to enrich the book, really, to have other people's points of view. Because obviously I only do what I do. I'm not saying, you know, you must do it this way, just experiment for yourself, basically.
So are you back at the Knitting and Stitches show tomorrow, or what else have you got coming up?
I am, because I discovered there aren't any bookstalls, which there normally are at these shows. So I sold out of my books yesterday, so I'm taking some more down.
Well done. Excellent.
Yeah, because I only sent a few in the first case, thinking there'll be all these other, booksellers selling them, but so I'll go myself. Yeah.
Have you got some spiky things? Oh, you mentioned that you balance this out with still working part-time. So in your creative time, have you still got some projects that you've got coming up or working on?
Yes. The 62 group, their next exhibition, we normally try and do one a year. It depends on the year, but next year we've got one called Tailored. In an old mill. Well, it's a gallery in an old mill, and they're celebrating the 10-year anniversary of the gallery being there, but also the fact that the mill used to provide the fabric for suiting. So they've given us the title, basically, Tailored. So we can interpret it however we wish.
Yeah. How's your word list going?
So my word list.
Yeah, I reckon that's pretty good.
Well, I have started it, but I've got to find a way in. It's
I'm sure
everything, because tailored implies neat and fitting, and it's a bit against how I work, basically. But I'll have to try. We all try and fit our own practice into whatever the title is. So
yes, you'll be working your magic and turning it on its head, I'm sure. Yeah. So I'm going to wrap this up now, because you probably need to go and have breakfast or something. But also, you've shared so much and it's been so great. So please, everybody, there's been lots of people tuning in, and thank you for everyone who has commented. But
yes, thank you so much. There were beautiful comments. Everybody who commented was so kind. Thank you.
Yes, and now's your chance really to thank Anne so much for her time and sharing all her little techniques and tricks and showing us and telling us all about her beautiful work. So yes, if everyone can do that, that'd be great. And if you just wait there for a minute, and I'll just play us out for our outro. And thanks everyone for spending time with us today. And wherever you are, have a nice weekend. And thanks so much.
Thank you.
Edward de Bono said, "Creativity